this. We schedule a part two. Perhaps we can even try and get Bulldog to come into the chat as well. How amazing would that be?
Tom, Pitbull.
Sorry, I think that was intentional. I think Tom's worried we might not be able to get Pitbull, but Bulldog I'm sure we'll be able to find and get on the show with us. I think that'll be awesome.
Well, hello and welcome to The Stream, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation with guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action. My name is Tom Freyberg, a content creator and environmental journalist specializing in water.
And my name is Will Sarni. I'm a water strategy consultant doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
And today we are really pleased to welcome our guest, Mike Zelkind, who is the CEO of 80 Acres Farms. Mike, good to see you and come in. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning, everyone.
Well,
morning.
Mike, we're going to talk today about what's being called the food revolution, urban farming, vertical farming, and kind of get into that. But just to kind of start, I mean, it's interesting that you said you listened to the stream whilst working out and playing golf. So we're delighted to hear that you haven't dropped any weights and you haven't hit more balls in the lake as a result of listening to us ramble on. So that was quite encouraging to hear.
Yeah, my golf game cannot be improved or hurt any further. So it is a perfect opportunity to walk a beautiful course and intellectually inspire myself and learn about topics that I might not normally get a chance to really, in a very calm, peaceful way, dig into. So it was quite fun.
And Mike, we're going to use that soundbite as part of our advertising. Basically, it's just that intellectual engagement with Tom and Will. So thanks.
You'll hear that being repeated many times.
That's what I'm good for. I'm good for sound bites.
Also, if you 3-putt or 4-putt, you have a really good excuse. You can just point your ears and go, it's Tom and Will. Just point to your golf buddies and say they put me off. All right. Well, lots of headlines at the moment about vertical farming, urban farming.
Wait, we're not going to talk about the shirts?
Yeah, we're gonna get into.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Tom, what's the deal? Is it like winter in the UK or what?
Hey, well, the thing is, there's a method behind the madness, because I knew we were going to be talking about tomatoes, right? If you've seen Mike's TED Talk, his opening line is about his grandpa's tastiest tomato that he had when he was a little boy, looking through the wardrobe, and I thought, what shirt do I have that's vaguely tomato coloured? And I looked through the other streams and thought, I haven't worn this number yet. Maybe it's a good time to bring out the red number. There's a little... you guys aren't buying it, are you?
As long as there's no throwing tomatoes, we can look like tomatoes. That's fine. Well, I was actually going to surprise you guys with a beautiful vintage Hawaiian shirt.
Oh.
Yes.
Mike, it's not too late. If you take a short break, we're good.
I did have this phenomenal shirt that when I started listening to your early podcasts, I was excited to bring out and was thinking about it and was very, very excited about it. Went to the closet this morning and was sad enough not to be able to find it. One of many privileges of being married is that your wardrobe gets updated, or things that are waiting to come back in sometimes disappear without any written or verbal consent. And apparently somebody is enjoying wearing my shirt somewhere else. So I had to go for the plaid from your earlier podcast to really tie everything together. So this is vintage. It's you guys vintage, your early episodes vintage. That's all I got.
I like it. Checked. Right?
513, Mr. Pesticide Free.
Well,
there we go.
You've dropped it in really early. Let's come back to that, because there is a hell of a story behind that little tagline. So cool. All right, shirts have done. So Mike, give us just for people who perhaps have been hiding under a rock, who haven't seen or haven't heard about kind of the vertical farming revolution, give us a kind of just real quick 101 in terms of the business model, what it is you guys do, and how, kind of reading some of your previous stuff, you're setting out to kind of update and change a system that you see as being completely broken.
Yeah, would love to. So look, we grow crops indoors, completely indoors. We use energy instead of from the sun from LED lights. And the reason we do all this is it enables us to grow crops anywhere in the world, in any climate, regardless of where people live 365 days a year. We're also able to grow these crops in the most sustainable way possible. We use a lot less water. I know we'll talk a bit about water, but 95 to 97% less water. We use absolutely no pesticides, hence one of the reasons for Mr. 513, Mr. Pesticide Free. We're able to grow crops with an optimal photosynthetic capability and grow them a lot faster. And we're able to stress the plants to get optimal nutrition out of the plants in the most natural way possible. So it's technology, meaning agriculture, creating this phenomenal capability to eliminate the food miles. On average, in US, food travels over 2,000 miles, globally over 4,600 miles. It provides an ability to grow food instead of in these few locations like Salinas, California, Yuma, Arizona for 3 months out of the year. We can grow it in the communities that would consume that food by those communities, essentially for the communities. You know, we can long-term start thinking about how to democratize food and engage our communities back into what is food, what is real food. It helps us deal with so many issues. Again, so much to say, the obesity epidemic. You know, we can fight a lot of symptoms, or we can address a disease. And one of the diseases is we're sitting around too much. We don't have good, high quality, nutritious, tasty food available. So we Skittles and all these other chemicals that fool us into, you know, feeling like we're getting something that we need, but we aren't. There's, you know, calories are cheap, nutrition is expensive. So the point is, we are actually growing food in a lot of these communities in a very sustainable way using technology. It's thrilling.
Mike, could you talk a little bit about your aha moment? I mean, you come from I want to say a fairly traditional ag background, and are, you know, at the tip of the spear in terms of ag revolution. I mean, what did you always recognize that this is where the sector needed to go, or was there a moment in time where you said, well, what I've been doing has been not crazy, but just, you know, not the best way to do it? And part the reason I ask is that I sort of went through a similar thing where suddenly I discovered sustainability, and it was, oh gee, I just spent, you know, the early part of my career doing things that didn't make any sense, and suddenly sustainability does. So, you know, your origin story, if you will.
Yeah, it's a great question. As you're framing it up, I was thinking about how to answer it, and I think the best analogy that pops into mind is there's always an aha moment, but it's kind of like being a 30-year overnight success, right? It's accumulation of all these different successes and failures and things you see and things you read and things you absorb and take in, and then it does kind of hit you. So perhaps I'll try to abbreviate the origin story, but I really do think it began with, you know, Tom mentioned with the Sugar Tomato podcast. When I was growing up, my grandpa, you know, did have a little garden, and, you know, I grew up around food, and I have a lot of phenomenal memories. Food connects us, right? So when I eat a tomato, it does bring back my childhood. It does bring back being in the garden with my grandpa, who hasn't been with us for, you know, God knows how many years. And it does connect you to things. Fast forward, I am an immigrant, so I came to this country when, you know, I was 12 years old, essentially. And early on, again, we were typical immigrants. We had, you know, no money, and we would go to the farmers markets, not because we were looking for higher quality foods, but because we knew that if you get to the farmers market in the last 15 minutes, no farmer wants to take their produce back with them. The concept of sell or smell it kicks in, which means that they start deeply discounting. And for us, that, you know, made a huge, huge difference. So, you know, so this concept of democratizing food and enabling communities to have access to really high quality produce, I think, has always been with me. Fast forward, I got my electrical engineering degree with a variety of minors and eventually an MBA and got into the food industry. I have no idea if it was random or not, but I started working supply chains and started working for pretty big food companies. And this concept of customer always being right, which is a great concept, but taken too far, like anything else, can become rather dangerous. I was part of building these global supply chains that, the concept is if somebody wants a strawberry 365 days a year, I want a strawberry, I'm a customer, you have to give it to me, but you can't grow strawberries here. We figured out how to get you the strawberry. But the problem is it's not the same strawberry that you had 20 or 30 years ago when people grew local strawberries. And I was part of that problem of building those global supply chains, which I think, I love to say potato chips are not computer chips, chips are not chips. Some supply chains should be global, and global trade is wonderful, and some supply chains should be local. Food, we strongly believe, needs to be grown, again, in the communities, for the communities, shouldn't travel, it should be picked at the peak of ripeness, it should be full of nutrition and flavor and taste, and should be bred for flavor and taste, not for logistics and transportation. But that mentality before technology enabled things didn't allow us to have strawberries and tomatoes and other great crops year round. So I think as I was running supply chains for major food companies, multinationals, global, multi-billion dollar companies, I started realizing something isn't right. And it was really the connection with all the farmers later in my career when I realized that farmers are constantly struggling. Farmers want their kids to be anybody or anything. They want their kids to be doctor, lawyer, taxi cab driver, not Uber driver, whatever. It doesn't matter, just not a farmer, because life is tough. You can't control anything. It's all gut. It's hard work. You can't walk by the time you're 40. Farmers are aging out, and we have this growing population. 70% of the world's water is used in farming. We're running out of phosphorus. We have less than an 80-year supply of phosphorus left, not because we didn't have enough mines with enough phosphorus, because we're overusing our nutrients through fertilizer so much. There has to be a better way. And the aha moment came when I started studying greenhouses and thinking about, with my business partner and with a variety of other folks, started thinking about how do we do this better? How do we get food production to be local? How do we get rid of the plastics issue, right? I mean, all of these issues, I love how interdisciplinary indoor farming is. We didn't have a plastics problem 50 years ago. We didn't have islands of plastics floating around when production was more localized. It's getting to these global supply chains and over-packaging everything, shipping it all over the place, got us to a plastics issue. But that's not a simple issue. Plastics serves a lot of purposes, including protecting shelf life. You can't just get away from plastic. It creates a whole bunch of other issues. So all of these are complicated but very interrelated issues. And honestly, we just kind of realized, 5, 6, 7 years ago that indoor farming was a key component of addressing a lot of these issues in a very meaningful way. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it's a really critical catalyst to question the way we do things and to begin changing how we eat.
I love.
Sorry.
I love that. That's great. And I love this intersection of technology transformation, better connecting us to food, like real food. So, I love how you're using digital technologies. That's a theme through really all of our conversations, giving people food that tastes good, and that's healthy. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful intersection of trends.
Absolutely. And, you think about it again from kind of the consumer, who's the end user of the product, the customer, who might be a distributor, a retailer, all the way through the whole value chain. It's from psychology to crop science with AI and machine learning stuck in the middle, all very meaningfully being integrated together if you think about it. You can't tell somebody, don't drink that big Slurpee or the Coke, it's bad for you, right? Because it's my personal right to do whatever I want, and how dare you tell me what you do. But if I can give you a really wonderful, beautiful alternative, which tastes better, it's better for you, makes you feel better, and I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm giving you an option. Many people, habits change, right? Behaviors, you've heard the whole thing, thoughts become What is it? Thoughts become behaviors, behaviors become habits, habits become character, right? The point is we have to present people with better options and let them make the choice. And people eventually always get to the right place given those options. So I think we have to integrate it. But to do that, we have to figure out the technology. We have to apply it to agriculture. We have to understand crop science. We have to figure out what to automate, not technology for the sake of technology, but technology for the sake of bringing down unit costs to, again, enable this great food in all these communities that otherwise might not be able to have it. You know, machine learning and digital and AI is really relevant. It's not just buzzwords we throw around. It's our crop cycles are so much faster that having the ability to learn fast enables us to learn what a normal farmer in any farm would learn in 10 years. We can learn in, you know, a couple of months because we can simulate environments so fast. And we can, you know, there's so much here, integrating it all into a cohesive business and then running that business the right way. That's quite challenging, but all the concepts are eighth grade science. It's how you pull it together.
Right? There was a good analogy I saw on, I think it was on your TED Talk videos, basically understanding the needs of the different plants or the crops throughout their life cycle. So you don't feed a teenager what you feed a baby. Right, in terms of an understanding throughout the life cycle and what you can do through the increased automation, surveillance, digital technologies is to understand the crops and give them exactly what they need at that point in their life to optimize the time in which you need to grow them. And if you're doing that more locally, and the time from harvesting to consumption is a lot quicker.
Absolutely. And now imagine, you know, that's exactly right. And if we think about it and actually take it to the next level now, and, you know, start thinking about nutrition and what we eat, right? Lettuce not just being something crispy and that you pour salad dressing on, but having something that tastes phenomenal, that's crunchy, that has a bunch of different flavors where realistically you don't really need salad dressing. You can still do it, but you can start weaning yourself off from a lot of it. How do you get to it? How do you control nutrition? You know, you start thinking about the fact that if you have all these different grow zones, these modular grow zones, and you can control the different recipes, and you have the vision systems and the sensors, and you understand everything about the environment, and instead of randomly a plant getting a lot more heat today and cooler tomorrow and less water tomorrow because of drought, and then suddenly a whole bunch of rain, and the sun now is moving, versus the earth, so you're getting different angles, you're seeing different spectrums and different amplitudes of energy, because sun is just energy, right? It's just photons coming off the sun, hitting the leaves, getting picked up in chlorophyll and converting through photosynthesis into this, the dry matter, the biomass that we end up eating, metabolizing. Photosynthesis is exactly the opposite process of metabolism, right? I mean, it's the circle of life. So if you can see that, and if you can control it, and if you can then say, wait a second, when it got a little warmer, the plant reacted in this way, and it naturally produced certain phytochemicals, vitamins, minerals. If you can capture that and understand that reaction, then you can reproduce it. And then you can start pushing the plants to completely naturally do what plants have been trained to do in nature over many, many years, to adapt to these conditions. And that is food as medicine. Right? And if you can have a consistent modular process that is repeatable, then you can really start thinking about this in a very different way. This isn't just lettuce. This isn't tomatoes. This isn't cucumbers. This is nutrition. This is customized nutrition, eventually customized to your DNA, customized to your exercise program. You know, the implications of what we're talking about are incredibly far-reaching. It might sound like science fiction, but having food grow indoor 5 years ago sounded like science fiction too. And today it's possible and profitable. So are we great at it? Absolutely not. We have so much to learn. I always like to use the baseball analogy, saying we're in a second inning of this baseball game. 5 years ago, we just dressed to play. You know, 3-4 years ago, you know, we just showed up to the field. A year ago, we were in the first inning. I think there's been tons of development in the last year, technologically and capability-wise. But I think we're finally entering the second inning. But we can't begin to fathom the implications of this capability.
You use some interesting words that translate into the water sector, hydration, so democratizing access to safe drinking water, customized, personalized hydration. And, we're certainly seeing the bottled water sector deliver that in PET bottles, but we're also seeing innovation in hydration technologies, outside the home, inside the home. So, there are some parallels between what you're delivering in a controlled environment and what we're seeing in the beverage sector line up, that people want choices. They want healthy choices if given the opportunities. And, they want, the affordability piece of it. So it's interesting that, these things are not running in parallel, but really intersect pretty nicely and capitalize on a number of trends, including technology innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it is fascinating that you bring that point up, because it is the integration between these fields. One drives the other, and it might not be really obvious what is driving what, but everybody's focusing on LED lights and replacing the sun, but it's not the LED lights for the sake of LED lights. LED lights are kind of, frankly, almost immaterial. It's today a very small part of the equation, but it is the LED lights which produce less heat, which allow the plants not to over-trans evaporate, which allow you to not have as much HVAC, which allow you to move your air more slowly through the growth zone, because you're not trying to dehumidify the growth zone. And all the technologies that you're talking about in water systems that are being developed, that again, partner with Priva, critical. The biggest risk to an indoor farm is the water system, because we're recirculating the water. That's how we achieve the savings. Instead of outdoors where you have your pivots and you're dropping the water, there's a certain amount of evaporation. A lot of the water gets absorbed into the soils. The roots of the plants are sitting there trying to pick that up. And again, water with CO2, with nutrients or fertilizer, and energy from the sun is what drives photosynthesis, right? That's what oversimplified, but those are the four major components. And all of it completely ties together. Without water technology, we wouldn't be able to recirculate the water. We wouldn't be able to capture the evaporation from the plants, dehumidify it essentially, clean it, test it, and send it back, and keep recirculating. Not only we're feeding the plants, but capturing everything they evaporate. Because again, going back to my outdoors example, the pivots drop the water, it's disseminated, the roots pick up, 5-10% of it. And then if you think about that water, what gets photosynthesized into biomass, it's 8 to 12%, right? Lettuce is 8 to 12% dry matter. The rest goes back out into nature. So plants are good little filters, but the point is that's why agriculture uses so much water. Well, capturing all the water, we're recirculating. That's why we don't have the waste. Without the water technology and capability, we wouldn't be able to farm indoors.
There's also the environmental challenge and burden of the water running off when it contains certain fertilizers, and then it can lead to eutrophication, increased algae in the local waterways, and all the kind of challenges that come with that. So it's a much more controlled environment that you're creating, right? And I think it's a purple LED light you use because it's a combination between the red and the blue, which kind of continues through the business, right? Because that's the right, correct me if I'm wrong, the spectrum of light to encourage the plant growth. So there's a reason why. I mean, I've seen some of your pictures. There's this funky, it almost looks like a disco for plants, but there's a scientific reason behind that bright purple neon light, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, plants need different spectrums at different times, and lighting is improving a lot, and there's still a lot of debates. How much green spectrum does a plant need? But to not totally geek out with you guys, but to answer that question very directly, to drive photosynthesis in the Kelvin cycle and Dyer cycle, you need 680 nanometer wavelength, which is the wavelength that we use to optimize photosynthesis. Now, when you look at photosynthesis in a plant leaf versus a whole canopy of a plant, what energy gets absorbed, what energy goes through, what energy is photosynthesized. This is, obviously a rather complex topic here. But yeah, the point is we do try to find optimal wavelengths and optimize photosynthesis and drive it. And you're absolutely right with all the runoff and yeah, one of the many aha moments in that 30-year aha path was a role I had where we came into the company and the company was shut down by the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality because of fish kill in Oklahoma that was caused by cleaning sweet potatoes in Arkansas. And I'm not going to walk you through the consent decree, but it was ridiculous the precautions that were taken, but there were so many nutrients in the soil that were being washed off from the sweet potato that this little sweet potato cleaning plant was treated like a nuclear waste site when everything got traced back. So we had to build wastewater pretreatment facilities. I mean, there was so much there because of over application of fertilizer in the first place because it wasn't a precise science. And again, it's not, I don't want to make it sound like farmers are doing bad things. These are, some of the hardest working folk. They're doing the best they can, but it's not a precise science, and it can be. That's why we can be so much more sustainable.
So, Mike, I want to go back to the disco comment.
Which highly scientific comment. It looks like
no. Bear with me on this. So, do you play music for the plants?
Oh, that's a great comment. Wow.
And if you do, this is a little like a deposition, Mike. So if yes, what do you play? Wow.
That's a beautiful comment. This is taking me back, and I wish if I could dial a friend. When we first started the company, one of my uncles is this great scientist. He's one of the guys that created a lot of the technology behind the first pacemakers. And he was helping us figure a lot of this out. And he was actually looking into this for us about 6 years ago about playing music to plants and the research that was done on it. And we actually did a bit of work on it. My favorite story, and I'm going to take you off the question a bit, and I promise I'll come right back to it. But you remember the old tale or the question that when you talk to plants, they grow better, so that wives' tale.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Carbon dioxide, right?
Yeah, carbon dioxide, right? Very, very obvious. Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to. If that's where you're going, I apologize about stealing the thunder. But yeah, we do not play mute. Well, let me rephrase that. Whoever runs our grow zones and whoever runs the packaging floor can do whatever they want from musical preference. So we should start collecting data on it, because I was going to say that we don't intentionally play music to the plants, but we do play music, I guess, to the plants, and it's different music, and I guess we should be collecting that data. So we have different grow zones to test that hypothesis without doing anything differently.
So I would love to see one of your farms in Denver, downtown Denver, and if this goes anywhere, I will play music.
I love it.
I think it's a lovely romantic notion.
Is it prerequisite for me to put a farm in Denver that I have to figure out a hybrid for the tomatoes so that once we harvest the fruit, you have to be able to smoke the leaves?
No, I don't think we want to go that path. I mean, that might be a niche market, Mike. So let's start with a mass market tomato. How's that? Sorry to take us off on that tangent.
No, I think we should carry on that tangent. What would you, if you could choose one song to play the plants for the opening for the 80 acres in Denver, what would it be, Will?
Oh.
And then go to you, Mike. And then we promise we'll come back on track. But I just think this whole music, we've got to carry on.
I think Bad to the Bone.
I like it. How do you think that maybe the plants would be?
Well, I grew up in New York, so I like food with an attitude. I just think, why not? A little bit of an edge.
I like it. Mike, what about you? If you could choose one song.
You're bringing me back in time to when I used to drive my son to soccer games, and he'd use the ride for Pump Up time. So there was a lot of Pitbull in the car all the time. What is he, Mr. 305, Mr. Worldwide?
I
So I
love
was
it.
good. It's a beautiful segue from music to Pitbull. I think we need to just re-explain the story behind that and the whole
Yeah.
105? No, 513 pesticide free. So let's go back. Give us the story behind Pitbull and that lovely, beautiful tagline that you dropped in. But I think for people listening, we need to explain that because it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of fun. I'm just trying to figure out. You do want me to clean up the story and keep it short and
Just a little bit, Mike.
Family-friendly language.
No
right?
expletives. Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, family-friendly show. Got it. So there was Barclays and Unreasonable Group, which is great couple of companies have been trying to further a lot of entrepreneurs with a lot of creative ideas. And post-COVID, they picked they had $1 million that they were awarding in grants to the entrepreneurial community that had the best response to COVID. We were very fortunate to be selected as one of those 10 companies. I think there's 3 or 4 companies from the US and a couple from Asia Pacific and a couple from Europe and a couple from India, Africa region. And it was wonderful because they had a big global summit just yesterday. And in that summit, Andrew Yang opened, Arianna Huffington closed, Joe, the head of banking for Barclays, spoke. But the surprise guest speaker, who's quite an entrepreneur himself, was Pitbull. And he showed up, and that man is wonderful, great energy. It's amazing. And in there, he kind of closed his thing with Mr. 305, Mr. Worldwide, and dropped the mic or something like that. It was phenomenal. It was exciting, compared to a lot of us entrepreneurs. The energy that he displayed was incredible. So I was getting a bunch of notes from my team, in particular, my head of HR, who was telling me, hey, we need to, if I'm going to clean up the whole story, I'll just shorten it by saying, we need to come up with some sort of fun tagline for us. So, and I couldn't remember my area codes. So he came up with Mr. 513, Mr. Pesticide Free. So I'm sticking to it.
Hey, we look forward to seeing that on your website, by the way, or in your next TED Talk.
That's above my pay grade. I'm not allowed to have any social media interactions. Our marketing team keeps me away from all that.
I think we should put that on the stream artwork, not the CEO of 80 Acres. Just that we actually just go with it.
Yeah, Mike, I think we're going to run with it. So
fun. I won't be allowed to do another one of these, so that's fine. It's my last one.
But what? You're not alone. All of our previous guests, they're not allowed to do this again with us.
Yeah, it's a good thing that's not part of the tagline, right?
Well, it might be.
Last podcast. I hope you enjoy it.
We don't pre-warn people too much. Yeah.
Turnabout's fair play. Hey, Mike, I mean, urban farming, vertical farming, to the layperson makes perfect sense in terms of, health, wellness, quality of the food. What are the challenges in scaling? Is it, the status quo? Is it, to Tom's point about like, what is this? So, what's your take? And how do we get you to Denver, of course?
Yeah, I'd love to get to Denver. Half my team will immigrate to Denver with a farm. Yeah, look, it's a great question, actually, incredibly insightful question, because I think scalability is a real challenge that a lot of our industry has not had the opportunity to really be thinking about yet, because we're also focused on really proving out a concept of a profitable local farm that serves the community, that provides great quality food, that is food safe. There's been a lot of recalls in a traditional food market, and all of us are trying. There's a food safety coalition that a lot of the pioneers in indoor space have created and formed, have done a phenomenal job with it. So there's a lot of things to work out to really learn to use data properly, to learn to affect the plants in the way we all want. So a lot of us are very kind of introspective, and we talk about the best of indoor farming, but a lot of us aren't really talking about exactly how you make the sausage, right? Because there's a lot to figure out. We screw a lot of things up, and you just have to go through iterations and figure it out. And there's a lot of complexity there. So once we get past that point, and I think a lot of the early pioneers are really starting to get past that point, I think the industry is really heating up. And we're just now starting to think about, well, how do you take this concept and how do you bring it to a different community? You know, how do you move with customers or move on your own and engage the community? And how do you bring people on board? Because a lot of the schools, it's not like I can go find an indoor farmer in Denver, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks that have been growing a lot of stuff in their basements and you know, now they've come out from underground, but it's still different. It's a very different capability. It's not a hobby. It's, you know, there is a lot of science. There is a lot of crop science. It's not gut feel. And you have to fly by wire in a sense, right? But you still have to understand crops. You have to understand technology. There's a lot of automation. So we've come up with an 80 acres university. We've come up with kind of modular design that we could in the cookie cutter way take and bring all over the place. We've come up with a lot of things. We've come up with partners in Europe and, you know, Delphi and others that, you know, we're working on how do we create programs to train future farmers with some US universities and outside universities. There's a lot of partners we're working with to enable scalability, and it's technological capability. It's when you put a farm up in Nigeria, you know, it's a very different concept. Energy sources are different. Cost of energy versus labor is different. The way, you know, you can't get spare parts. You're going to be working with local villages, and you have to approach it very, very differently than putting up a farm in Scandinavia somewhere where your energy is free, your labor is incredibly expensive, and the protection of farmers is very different than elsewhere. I mean, all of those situations are very unique, require local understanding, local knowledge, a lot of partners. So yeah, we've been spending a lot of time trying to find those global partners, technology partners, community partners, financial partners. It's rather complex, but the beautiful thing is there's so much work going on behind the scenes that once we start scaling, we'll scale rather fast. And it will be one of those, you know, 30-year overnight successes because people will understand how it happened, but it happened by, you know, 5 years of planning and thinking and screwing things up. And again, we're not the only ones doing it, right? I mean, there's a slew of phenomenal visionaries and pioneers in, you know, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, all over the world that are working on this, that are thinking about it. And I think our industry will shift a lot in the next couple of years. I think you'll see a lot more consolidation. I think you'll see more partnerships. I think people are starting to recognize that there's certain things we can't compete on. I don't want to compete with anybody on food safety. I'll give everybody our food safety playbook because any recall is bad for the whole industry. But I will
open access on food safety, essentially.
Yeah. Certain things, absolutely. None of us should ever compete in that. But other things, you know, we will compete in on branding, on marketing, on automation, on technology, on best systems, on a variety of things. So the industry is so young that it's trying to figure out how to play together, and it's so capital intensive that folks are a little nervous about what can I give away and what do I have to keep inside, right?
Is that, would you say, the sort of from the traditional horticultural crowd and discussions you have, is normally one of the first points of resistance is the cost and the economics from a traditional kind of farming community, would you say? So, because from articles I've read, that the economics seem to come up quite a lot, particularly you're talking about in a kind of places where the land cost is perhaps at a premium. So, but like this is such, it's progressing so quickly at such an early stage that the economics are going to be driven down as the innovation increases, right? So that's something that's going in the favor of vertical farming.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, well, first of all, we have to always compare apples to apples, right? It's the challenge with statistics is, you know, smart people can make statistics say anything they want them to say, but it's really hard to take, you know, a 5th generation farmer with paid off land that has, you know, all their harvesting equipment and planting equipment and everything else. They import labor. Labor is relatively cheap. They overseed, overplant, and start praying to God that the crops come up. And on a good year, they're geniuses. And on 2 out of 3 bad years, they get by and get and the governments subsidize all of it. So you build this infrastructure system when so much of our food is subsidized, so much of our food is crap, it travels everywhere. Look at nutritional value. Look at the fact that, look at the medical bills in the last 20 to 30 years versus food bills, right? And our medical bills have risen a lot, significantly. I actually have the numbers that we're happy to share. And our food cost as a percent of GDP, income, whatever metric you want to look at, has gone down a lot. And everybody's saying it's too expensive. So we've had this race to the bottom. We're not looking at total cost. We're not looking at health until it's too late. And we got this heavily subsidized system, which is competing against a new capital intensive system. Yeah, it's easy to sit there and complain and bitch about how much it costs, but let's compare apples to apples, and let's compare nutritional value. Let's compare quality. Let's compare flavor. Let's compare sustainability. Let's compare about the impact we're having on the world. And all of a sudden, the cost equation is completely flipped, right? Even, you look at the greenhouses, and by the way, the greenhouse industry has been a model industry for us, because I think the greenhouse industry, especially in Holland, but it applies to Spain, it applies to a lot of other geographies. But in Holland, talk about phenomenal collaboration, talk about great long-term farmers, growers that grow up in these greenhouses, and they share a lot of things. And the greenhouse industry is phenomenal at sharing things. But again, it's because that industry has crossed the chasm 50 years ago. That industry is 50s, 60s that has paid off its cost structure. So it's kind of easy on a back end when you've kind of commoditized everything to start sharing things. We're in the early stages. We haven't crossed the chasm. We have very high costs of capital. So, when you look at it more holistically, you realize that already today, with improvements in efficacy of LED lights, with the water technology being proven, the automation, top costs are labor and energy. All the other cultivation costs are the same as everywhere else. Well, look at the decline of the energy costs and labor costs in indoor farming and controlled environment as a whole, but in particular in indoor farming. I mean, it makes Moore's Law, seem like, that's your grandpa's Oldsmobile, right? Or your daddy's Oldsmobile, or however many generations want to go back. I mean, we're moving so much faster than Moore's Law that it's not even funny. I mean, the rate of change, again, I learned this from my son. I always say that I learn most from my kids, actually, because they see the world so differently that it always just so opens up my mind on how I should be looking at the world. And the younger they are, the more you learn, right? But this is from my oldest, from my son. But his point is that the biggest mistake that humanity has always made is we've always underestimated the rate of change. And I think you read that somewhere and maybe modified it, but you look at the rate of change in indoor farming, and what we're thinking is sci-fi today in 5 years is going to be the most ubiquitous thing, and you're going to have no idea how we ever lived without it.
Yeah, I agree with your son, or whoever he got it from, that, the future always shows up faster. I mean, it just does. And it's, Tom and I have talked about this. It's lumpy. I mean, the future is in place, established somewhere else. And it's, more a matter of, floating all boats than, a linear process. So yeah, it happens faster than we think it will.
I think, going back to an earlier comment, Mike, this is happening at so many different levels, right? From yourself running it as a business, through to hobbyists, through to companies involved in shipping containerized urban farms to people who can actually grow their own. So in terms of the technology, there's pockets of all this innovation that's happening as we speak. So I think it's just a matter of time. And like I said, it's a solution, because me and Will recently, we did some work and content on this new water innovation technology. We won't go into the details or the name, but as often is the case, sometimes the mainstream media will look at this particular innovation, say this is the answer to water scarcity, and no doubt you've probably seen the articles that say this is the answer to world hunger, to feeding 9 billion people. Whereas, like you said earlier, it's not a silver bullet. This is one solution in the toolkit available that we need to think differently. So I think that's really important to emphasize here.
Exactly. But it all does feed on itself, right? I mean, it is, in a sense, all these, I don't know, thinking here, trying to think fast, and my history is my old brain is not processing as fast as it used to, but I'm trying to figure out Zaibatsu versus Karatsu here. But it is a bunch of these little Karatsus forming in the sense, right? I mean, it is a bunch of Silicon Valleys growing up, because as we're doing this, we need the water knowledge, and we're pushing that, and we need the lighting LED technology. And by the way, what's after LEDs? Because I don't think we're going to be doing this with LEDs in 5 years, right? And then again, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, the seed breeding, all of these things, all these industries are rising. Think about the derivatives of that. It's like cannabis has been pushing all this technology development, because a lot of times, with respect to all of our cannabis friends, more money than sense, right? Because margins are huge, and time to market is more important than short-term profit margins. So it makes a lot of sense to spend a little more to try to push things a little faster. And think about, again, all the derivatives of that speed of change and all the other parts the industry starts throwing off. I mean, it's quite phenomenal. It's mind-boggling how innovation drives more innovation at such an exponential rate.
Right.
I want to come back to the we touched upon it earlier, but the idea that people kind of providing the solution to that demand of people wanting more nutritious, locally grown and sourced food. But I don't want to dwell upon the elephant in the room of COVID-19, but do you think one of the positives to come out of this is the fact that this will only accelerate that need for more nutritious food, and perhaps people will crave and realize, actually, we always talk about resilience of infrastructure, resilience against climate change, but we don't often talk about resilience of people for second waves, that type of thing. So do you think, I just go back to a video I remember seeing someone share on social media, is the queues when a certain fast food establishment opened up for the first time, offering a drive-through through the Golden Arches, was down the road. I mean, literally, you would not believe the queue from this I hate to say a British town. The queues were unbelievable, right? So it goes to show that you're still competing against the big boys when it comes to advertising, marketing dollars, convenience, cheap, fast food. So do you think this is going to accelerate the people wanting and realizing the benefits of nutritious food, is the question. Bit of a long-winded question, but I think it's an interesting one to maybe finish upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, because what I love about your question is we can probably start 4 or 5 other phenomenal conversations from that question, right? And I don't know if you want me to answer the question with my COVID mask on or leave it off, but yes, the short answer is yes. I absolutely believe that COVID has shined a light, as a lot of these type of epidemics do, on a lot of issues in our society that we would normally ignore when everything is going well. So I think you talk about resiliency of people, you talk about resiliency of supply chains. Yes, supply chains are a lot more fragile. We don't want to talk about it, but there's food rotting in farms, and yet supermarkets had empty shelves, right? So we can talk about our flawless supply chains all we want, but the point is there were a lot of things that are broken. We have food service supply chains, we have channel-specific supply chains, retail supply chains. By the way, folks were pivoting, and major food service distributors were trying to service retailers, and there were collaborations, and people are wonderful, resilient beings, and they always find a way, and necessity drives is the mother of innovation, right? So all of these things, I am a bit of a cheerleader and an optimist, but every threat is an opportunity. I'm going to stop a bunch of random buzzwords and old Chinese expressions here, but the idea is, I absolutely think that COVID is a catalyst to force us into more sustainable, more local production. I don't love parts of COVID, because as much as social distancing is necessary and we all practice it, I'm a big believer in microbiome in the gut, and I do think that sometimes digging in stuff is actually quite healthy for all of us, and keeping kids apart and not mixing things, I think long-term can have negative impacts on our resilience. And I do look for a time when our kids are playing together and getting sick and building up their immune systems and and playing in dirt again and doing all those things that we know are incredibly necessary. Yeah, look, human race is resilient. Good things will end up coming out of it eventually. It's hard to think about it. It's hard to see it, but as a society, we will all bounce back. And I really do believe that you can't trim back the clock. Our food systems will be more localized. It's up to us, the pioneers in the space, to prove that our system works, it's effective, it's clean, and it's affordable. And once we do, you know, I don't care how much money is chasing it and advertising against it and do whatever else. There's no going back. And by the way, I think the big food companies totally get it. I think they're all watching it. I think they're smart and they're strategic, and they're not going to bet on a whole bunch of indefinite options. But as we start proving solutions work, they're going to figure out how to partner with us and how to become their ingredient suppliers and how to shorten those global supply chains, because they understand this is more efficient. And they understand that they're not the innovators, right? By definition, those big companies buy small companies, they partner. Innovation has to occur in smaller, more nimble companies, and bigger companies at the right time come in and start taking advantage of it. That's just a natural way of things. There's a reason large companies have built their bureaucracies.
Well, certainly more disruption and change to occur, I think. But Mike, we're kind of at the end of our slot. There's still a lot of things I think both Will and I want to chat to you about. So I think, how about this? We schedule a part 2. Perhaps we can even try and get Bulldog to come into the chat as well. How amazing would that be?
Tom, Pitbull.
Sorry,
I think that was intentional. I think Tom's worried we might not be able to get Pitbull, but Bulldog, I'm sure we'll be able to find and get on the show with us. I think that'll be awesome.
It's like the knockoff version.
So wait, so we don't edit any of this, right? So it's out there now.
I'm good to go.
So to the stand-up artist Bulldog, if you're listening, it's an open invite.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
So Mike, or should I say 513 pesticide free, is a new nickname. It's been a pleasure. Please find that retro shirt for part 2 because we want to see it to bring it back in. And a pleasure as always. Will, any kind of final closing comments from you before we sign off?
I would just say, Mike, we need to talk about Denver.
I'm ready to go. Let's take that offline. My team would be thrilled about Denver.
You have a deal. Let's chat. All right. Thanks so much. Love this.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Will, Mike, thank you. And for everyone tuning in, the next one, we're going to speak to Rachel Young, who is the CEO of Mammoth Water, to continue the discussion about the food, ag, and water sustainability. So make sure you tune in for that as well. But Mike, Will, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
Bye, guys.